Hey everybody, welcome back to Painting from Life here at East Oak Studios. So glad that you're a part of this. I know that Kelly right now is working on getting the images up for you on our website. If you're new to our platform, basically you can click on a link below in the show notes and it will take you to where you can get the reference images. We'd love it if you painted along. If you do paint along, make sure that you know that you can ask questions and talk with us, because we love to hear where you're from, what's going on, and if there's any questions you have for all the lovely ladies that we have working tonight on Painting from Life. So the people that are painting tonight is lovely Miss Chelsea, who's going to come into the frame for 2 seconds to say hi. Yep, right on cue. Okay. And then we have the lovely Lysandra.
Hey, hey.
This is her first time. This is her painting debut. She is also a fellow Raleian and went to Florence Academy.
I did.
And you can ask her questions about that as well.
You can.
And then one of her fellow college students at Florence Academy back in the day, and also a Raleian, who has a lot in common with each other, is Erica, and she will be on the far right, and everybody will be painting the lovely Sable tonight, who is from Maine and happens to be visiting. She drove all the way down here just to do this.
Woot woot!
I'm lying, it's not true. However, we are so glad and thankful that she could fit us into her schedule and her traveling experiences. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Make sure that you comment, say things to us. We'd love to hear from you. And without further ado, you're up.
Okay. Clock set for 20, right?
I guess so.
Okay, good. Great. Alrighty. So Erica, should we tell everybody that how we actually know each other for real? Like the depth of our friendship?
I think so.
Okay, should I start?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I got into the Florence Academy. This was in 2015. And we were just, meeting everybody, and there was this girl named Diana. She was great, and she was like, we're doing the where are you from, all the things. And I said I was from North Carolina, and then she said, where in North Carolina? I said, Raleigh. She said, well, where'd you go to high school? I'm like, she was literally like from Arizona or something. I was like, why are you asking me this? And I said that I was from my school, and she goes, oh, my roommate went to that school. And it was a small private school here in Raleigh. And I was like, you're not serious. You just can't be right. But she was, and Erica was, and we didn't overlap at high school because she's a smidge younger than I am, but literally we went to the same school and ended up in the same place in Florence, and it was just pretty cool. So,
serendipity.
It was. It really was.
Because the school that we went to wasn't that big either.
No, it was not very big. No, it was pretty crazy that happened that way. Pretty cool.
Erica, you also had some visiting guests this past few days that were also from Florence Academy. Tell me about having them in town.
Oh, it was so good. For people who don't know, Marty Welsh and Richard Greathouse, you should definitely look them up. Look up their work.
Yes.
Them as people, as instructors, as artists. They're just fantastic people. And so we hadn't seen each other for, I think, a couple of years now. But we were really close. We were in Florence. And
Since their wedding, right? Didn't you go to their wedding?
Yes, I was co-maid of honor.
Oh, wow. Very fun.
But of course, it was just wonderful to see friends, colleagues, all of that again.
So fun. And they are a Florence Academy romance, so that's a fun thing.
They are, yes.
We like that.
It's amazing how many romances.
It's true. It's very true. So this is the first time that I'm painting on an artifacts panel, which I'm sure many people probably on this live stream have done before, but I'm not used to the lack of give because I usually paint on stretch canvas. This is going to be a good experience for me to learn. Do most of y'all in this room paint on panel or on stretch canvas?
I was a stretch canvas person until I started coming down here and learned more about panels.
Yeah, no, I have great respect for the archival nature of them. It's very cool.
They're a little challenge. Takes a minute to get used to it.
Yeah, it will.
But then
It'll take a second, but I'm excited.
And for me, it just depends on the project. If it's you know, something around a week, I can paint, or less,
Yes.
you know, a day, between a day and a week, I'll
Yes.
paint on a panel. But
Okay.
if it's longer than that and takes a little more work in terms of like layering and then I'll go onto canvas, probably.
Interesting.
Yeah. So usually if I do something figurative, it will be on canvas.
Yes, on canvas. No, that's good. I feel like it just has to be said, because it's my first time doing this, that there is very much like a Bob Ross sense that I'm having right now. That I'm not painting like Bob. I think he'd be offended by me right now, but it's fun to consider. Had to just speak it one time. I did it now. Sorry, Sable.
We already have some hellos from Gary Lepore. He says, hi, Chelsea and Lewis and Lysandra and Erica. And Lisa says, so glad to see you all again. And Rosalie says, hi, all. Hoping to get started from Arizona. 110 degrees these days.
Oh my goodness. Well, it was supposed to be 102 today here. It wasn't quite that, but
Yeah.
we can hang with the best of them in Arizona with 102. That's hot. I bet Sable from Maine doesn't know what 102 would even feel like.
I'm in Arizona.
No, okay, never mind then. You know more than I do then.
And I was here today. I was here today.
Oh, that's right, you were. So you welcome to North Carolina.
So generally, what are you guys thinking about as you're laying down your drawings?
Good question.
I am thinking about proportions and big shapes, so that way I don't get too into the features and then step back and realize, wow, that's not in the right place. And so just taking a minute to look at how the head is going to then sit on the shoulders, and then kind of slowly breaking it down into smaller pieces. So I'll look at within the head where in general, you know, certain bone structure points are, like cheekbones and eye sockets. And then only after that, then I start getting into some features a little bit. And so just making sure my drawing is set before I start layering in with color and value.
That's good. I always think about, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show these things in my own drawing today, but I'll tell you what I'm trying to think about is always maintaining the concept of the whole. Because if you lose the concept of the whole, you don't really have very much in all the little pieces. So it helps to step back. I'm used to working from with sight size, and so this is pretty different for me too. So again, another thing to stretch myself. But so I don't have a ton of experience with comparative measurement, which will probably show in my drawing. But that said, I think the principle of maintaining the concept of the whole is consistent no matter how you're trying to tackle a project. So.
Doing something a little different today, which is I am really trying to focus the majority of my marks where I want the focal point to be, and like really making sure that I'm getting an impression of what I'm seeing, and trying to really control marks that could distract from that. So for instance, right now, I see a significant dark line on the right side of her face down into her neck, where it folds back, and you're really seeing like the depth of her hair back there. It would be easy if my eyes are wide open to read that as the darkest dark on here, and I do not want that to distract from her eyes. So I'm trying to make a lot of decisions based on curating this information and creating a visual hierarchy Also, hi, Gary.
Can I just say, I love that you said the word curating, and I love how artists speak when they're speaking well about what they do, because it is curating. We're constantly choosing and selecting, but it's fun to hear artists speak to each other because there's like a whole language that is just different than the rest of the world. But it's actually pulling from art, other arts and music and other things. It's just neat. So anyway.
Like the related disciplines.
Yes, all the related disciplines. Yes, it's true. Exactly. I'm really liking the tilt of your head, Sable. It's really nice. So when you get back up there again, we'll find that again. It's so nice. Thank you. No, I know. All you can do is your best. It's great, but it's really nice. Thank you. Also, something that relates to looking for the whole too is trying to find big lines that connect through. So what's the overall gesture that we're seeing? Because proportion and gesture from the beginning, you can get all of these things beautifully drawn, but if you lose the gesture too, it's really hard to get that back. So again, things to say, not as much maybe to watch me do, but as I try. But I love the concept of looking, and use your brush in the air even to kind of get yourself to think about that. What is the gesture
all the time.
It's so helpful. And it's kind of like you're giving yourself a goal to strive for as you go.
I think part of it too is remembering that you're not necessarily copying what you're seeing, but to really feel it. And
Yes.
And you need, you're not just recording like a moment, you're actually recording like the life that is in front of you.
Amen. That's so good. The word translate, I felt like was always helpful to hear. We are translating. But that's a good point. Over time, it's a snapshot of time. It is cumulative. Also, something that people that I respect and appreciate in the art world do from the beginning is they decide, maybe you already said this, Chelsea, and I was listening, but like you decide already that do you talk about hierarchy of edges? Did you already say that? Or no?
Not specifically edges.
Yeah. But I'm already thinking, are there edges that I can keep soft from the beginning that I see that are going to stay soft? Can I let them bleed into the background to create a sense of the impression from the beginning rather than trying to do that at the end after I've done a lot of things?
And for me, because of the angle that I'm looking at, I want to make sure I have her inclination and her position. I want it to be flexible, but I want certain things to be understood, so that way when she comes back into the pose, I'm like, okay, I know how far the nose, for example, is overlapping the far cheekbone.
That's good.
And so if I have that distance decently accurate, then it's something that I can come back to, and I know, okay, I don't have to change.
That's great.
Or I can help, make sure that my drawing and her position are lining up. So there's certain like key relationships. Basically, I'm recording her rotation. And
that's really good.
Without getting too far into the drawing.
Right. I have something that I really like thinking about, again, that I'm trying to consider at these early stages but hold. One of my teachers at the Florence Academy would talk about, this was in New York, about how long can you hold off, particularly for the lower third of the face, on like putting the lips in, though you see that I've done that. But are you thinking about the muzzle of this lower third of the face? I think is a really helpful thing to consider. And it always feels slightly offensive to say someone has a muzzle, so sorry, Sable, you have a lovely face. But we all technically have a muzzle, and so what does it look like to try to capture that form so then the lips sit on top of a muzzle? It's not lips on top of an open space. I really like that concept. It's like a challenge. How long can I hold off on that? I didn't hold off very long, but it's a good challenge. I also like using a brush to erase, a dry brush you don't care about ruining very much. haven't looked at next door, but I'm super excited to, on our break, see like how the starts look next door to me. But I'm choosing to not so that I don't get intimidated, but but just how you choose to start. There's so many different ways to start a painting.
I think it's also cool to see, since there's, like you said, there's so many ways to start a painting, but often people are thinking of similar things.
Yes.
So it's almost like
Yes.
different ways of interpreting the same information.
It's so cool. It's amazing. Many roads to Rome. Isn't that what they say? What is it? Many, whatever the phrase is. Y'all know.
Is it like all roads lead to
There we go. I don't know, but I guess
Something like that.
Anyway, lots of ways to skin a cat. Anyway,
There it is.
Lots of ways to solve the same problems. This is what I'm trying to get at. They're going to stop my mic in a second.
I'm also going to make sure I spend time checking out the mirror, using the mirror to...
Okay, fine. That's good. Me too,
I
peeps.
got mine, you got yours.
Using the mirror, it's just the best. Yeah. The best way of, thank you. Especially if you paint by yourself in the studio.
Yeah, just could you be my model,
way
or not my model, my like assistant?
A way of keeping track of proportions.
Yes, yes.
And having a critical, truthful eye.
Yes.
The mirror is the best thing for that.
So good. Are you using a black mirror?
Right now I'm using a broken makeup mirror.
There you go. I love a makeup mirror. You get a lot of freebies and like a makeup thing. Always save those and give them to your art friends. Come in little pouches too.
Shape design is also something that I'm considering at this stage, and even though my lines right now are pretty straight and blocky, I am thinking about making sure I don't lean into that too much. Not that I'm making curves yet, but that I don't make my shapes too generic.
That's
so that
good.
I'm always thinking about being more specific, and all of that has to do with accuracy, but without being too detailed yet. So it's that kind of interesting relationship between being specific but not necessarily being detailed.
Yes,
It's like
yes.
for this stage, and how to balance that
Such
out.
a great point. I just want to say this first 10 minutes of this experience has been such a good reminder to me. We'll see how this goes in the end. I don't know, but I was pretty nervous to come tonight to be with y'all. I was pretty worried about how this would go, and I'm already having a blast. And so it's just a good life lesson for Lysandra to go do hard things with people who will be a safe space and encourage you. And all of you who are on here who are doing hard things in the art world, it's so worth it, isn't it? So anyway, just my 2 cents of living that in this moment. But this is such a blast. I hope y'all are having fun, and I hope y'all do scary art things that challenge you too. It's a very brave world to be in.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Love that.
Thank you. Also, something I think that anyone who has painted with people and then all of a sudden stopped painting with people, so if you were in art school or you were with an art group or whatever, and then you stopped, you remember how fun it is to be painting with other artists, and it's just, there's nothing quite like it. It's very inspiring.
Let's have about 30 seconds.
Oh no. Okay, one thing I want to say for 30 seconds is that something that people that I admire do well is that they find the biggest way they can solve a problem in the beginning. So how much can I fuse all these shadows together and get away with it? What can I, again, sort of like the muzzle, how long can I get away with not putting in the mouth? How much can I fuse that I can still get away with it meaning something? Because again, that goes back to that whole. It's so important. Oh, here we go.
everybody. We are going to break for our model break.
A little bit more? Perfect.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
That's really good.
Thank you. Does that work for you, Chelsea?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are getting started now on our second pose.
And we're back. We were talking during the break about how different people consume watching this in a live form, and then sometimes at another date, or they'll be painting in their own studio something else and they're watching, which I think is so cool. I'm curious, do y'all listen to things while you paint if you don't have a model that day, or are you in silence?
When you say y'all, are you asking?
I'm asking, yeah. There's Chelsea and Erica and Carolyn.
Yeah, in the past I often listen to podcasts and audiobooks, more audiobooks lately, but yeah, I will typically do that a little bit more than I will do music, actually.
Just to have some human voices.
Yeah, and just something to keep me in my chair.
Yeah, I hear it. One of the things that I'm grateful that I tried to do, actually one of our teachers, Simona, who was Italian, and she's the head drawing teacher in Florence, she would say you shouldn't, while you're in school, listen to a lot of music, because there is something that is, even if we're focusing, something that can be distracting about that. And so I tried to listen to her. If I was really having an angsty day, I would have my headphones in and she would be like, steer clear. But I learned so much because you could hear everybody else's critiques that way. And it was like, I got 12 critiques in the model room instead of just the one. So I was really grateful for that practice.
I absolutely eavesdropped.
Yeah, totally eavesdropped.
For sure.
Unless they were in another language, and you're like, oh, well, okay, fine. I'm gonna guess what you're saying right now. But that was really helpful. Also, something else I'll just say, if anyone's on their way to art school officially, like to a program, is the very first day of school, I got a Fabriano notebook from somewhere in Florence. And I literally wrote down the first thing that the director of the school said, from day one, and every critique I would try to get that out and take notes. And I know that everybody learns different ways. So for me though, it was just a way for me to really absorb. And I have now 15 of those notebooks. And one day, I don't know, at a time in my life, I want to go through them and catalog and actually say, these are all the things I learned over 3 years about color, and these are all the things I learned over 3 years about value, or whatever, all the things, because of course this is layered learning. All of art study is layered learning, but it was a really neat thing that I'm very glad that I did. So anyway, if anyone is in a more structured art environment and you like learning that way, that's my 2 cents. It was good.
Yes, to piggyback off of that,
please.
I definitely recommend taking notes.
Yes.
Though I like your more structured way. I found pieces of scrap cardboard
right.
I would just write because I found that in order to remember it, I just needed to write it down immediately, and I wasn't always prepared with my notebook in hand, and so having to go back and rewrite things down at the end so I don't lose that information.
And there was something, I don't know if this is about me, but maybe some OCD tendencies or something, but something about having the same type of notebook and the same whatever, that I felt like I was building a little collection was motivating. And so it felt more, I'm not a particularly organized person by nature, and so it kind of gave me some tracks to groove on. So anyway, for those of you that might feel you're not super organized, maybe choose from the beginning something and try to stick with it that way. That may be really annoying to breathe in so deeply. Sorry, everyone. Is that annoying, Caroline? Do you think people can hear that?
ASMR.
Well, yeah, exactly. It totally is. Just trying to give you all a very interesting experience over here.
Alex would like to know if anyone's ever varnished a painting when it's touch dry. Curious to know how it turned out. It can be tough to wait so long when selling to clients and through galleries when time is a factor.
I do it all the time with Gamvar.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Have you ever had any weird beading happen with Gamvar or no?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a way to prevent or predict if that's going to happen or not, or is it just like a thing that sometimes happens?
Louis has like a great tutorial on it that's
look at
on.
that, Louis.
Yeah, like
Okay, I should go watch that.
I literally referred to that when I had that problem.
Okay.
And when people ask me questions about varnishing,
Yes.
I'm always like, if you want like the really in-depth tutorial,
The real answer,
like
yes.
go watch
That's
like their hour-long tutorial on varnishing. It's great.
Great.
And where can people find this?
Yes, thank you. Where can they find this?
I mostly look for it on Facebook. I assume it's also on YouTube.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes and
apparently
yes.
it is also on YouTube.
Yeah. The varnish one?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
That's great.
It started on YouTube.
That's really great to know. Thank you. But yes, but Gamvar as a product though, I feel that touch dry is still definitely possible, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be the negative Nancy.
Yeah, do it, girl. Do it. We need you.
I would just pay attention to what materials you're using. That way you're not doing touch dry with like stand oil, which will definitely not be dry.
Good.
So just be cognizant of what you're doing, and I mean, wait as long as you can.
Yes, yes, that's good.
That's probably the advice I would give.
I think that's good advice.
It's mostly like if, God forbid any reason you needed to remove the varnish, you wouldn't want to remove your painting with the varnish.
Yes, yes.
So just be attentive.
Stai attento. Good question. It's so interesting because this imprimatura, this wash behind is so, which I'm sweet. Erica's letting me use one of her panels, but because it's so orange, it's an interesting thing to judge my initial
Oh yeah,
blocking of
things
color.
look super cool.
Like, is that? So I'm going to try to kill some of that orange before too long so I can kind of see if this feels like it's in the right ballpark.
Cool in temperature.
Cool, yes, exactly. You can call me cool in person too. It's fine.
It's both.
It's both.
Lisa asks, what advice do you have for learning to do a portrait when there is no access to a model?
Good question. I would say, and this is something that I have not done a lot of, so this is like true confessions, but that copying portraits from masters would be a great way to try to study portraits that are done hopefully with more ideal circumstances already, that some of those problems have already been solved. So you're saying, I love this Sargent portrait, or I love this Repin, or I love this whatever, choose your person, and then try to copy, but in a sense unpack how they maybe did it. So try to start the painting the way you best know how to start the painting, but then try to build up to where they are. So, and I would say I do that for different types of artists, but particularly those that you're drawn to their work, because I think that can be most fruitful for you. That would be what I would say initially. I'm curious if anybody else has other thoughts.
And I agree about making sure that you are copying paintings.
Yes, yes.
I mean,
yes.
obviously, like you use whatever resources you can.
Sure.
But if you copy paintings, then you're learning the painterly language.
Yes.
Versus getting caught up in trying to understand what information do I include and what do I not. Like the painting, if you copy the painting, it'll help you. You can ask yourself, if you compare the painting that you see versus imagining what the setup was like, so you can ask yourself, what information did this artist not include in the painting? Often that question is quite useful for understanding what then should I include in the painting, and often it's maybe a little bit less than we
Otherwise would
expect.
That's a great point, Erica.
That was a Florence Academy thing.
Wow.
I didn't come up with that on my own.
It's good. I like the idea of envisioning the setup and considering what they didn't put in. That's a really great point. I'm learning. Love that. Also, beg your family to sit for them, for you. Or your best friend or whoever, and then tell them that if they do 2 hours, you'll buy them dinner or something. It's such a foreign concept to people today, but also such a cool thing that if your people have the experience of sitting from life for you, not only do they understand your world better, but it's really a neat thing for them to get to do. I mean, very few people that we come across on a daily basis have had the experience of sitting for a portrait. So I think it could be a worthwhile thing for them too.
Also as an artist.
Right, yes, that's a good point. You're saying sit if you are an artist? Mm-hmm.
That's a great point.
What have you learned when you have done that?
Well, it is a very humbling experience, and it makes me very grateful for the model. And it's kind of painful for me. Like my head goes back, like my neck starts to hurt, and I start to feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience. So I'm very grateful for models.
Yes, yes. We appreciate you, Sable. There's always this kind of weird, I mean, there can be a lot of ugly duckling stages in a portrait, but I feel like when you still have like bits and pieces that are not covered and you think they should eventually be covered, not the ones you're trying to save. Sometimes you're trying to save pieces of the portrait, but if you know it's going to go away and it's not gone yet, that can be a little interesting. It's a process.
Yeah, this is the phase where it's like trust.
Yes, trust the process.
Keep going, even if you're like, whoa, those shapes are abstract.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, is it really loud?
Awesome.
Is it too loud? No.
Are you an artist? Yeah.
I can't, I find it very helpful to put my background in sooner than maybe others might need, quote unquote, but sometimes I just feel like I need it, and this colors. I think I wanted to neutralize it too, but. Something though that I think is such a skill is figuring out how to, like, if you're doing a portrait sketch, put in your background such that it is interesting too. I don't really know if I've really fully, I'm curious if anyone here has any thoughts on that, how they're, you know, what you're putting in, what you're not. Is it just feeling it out? Are there rules to this? I don't know, I'm curious. World, someone answer me.
I would love to hear Chelsea's perspective on
Chelsea?
this.
Oh, it's interesting because I'm kind of in the process of trying to better understand that for myself. So I think the answer I would have given last month is probably significantly different.
So we have to ask you next month again.
Right. Right now, I am juggling a couple of different things with relation to the background.
In this
painting?
painting?
Yes. One is I know I want to lose the entire left edge of her hair, except for the very top of her head.
Yeah, I hear that.
And so I am actively doing that from the very beginning. I'm not establishing an edge that I just want to lose.
Yeah.
We do have an interesting thing happening on the right, which is the strong amount of contrast that we have because the backdrop changes a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And that contrast is helping to tell the story of this silhouette. I don't want to try and imagine what would happen if that backdrop were extended, but I don't want the contrast into the background to, again, take away from the focal point, which is her eyes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to go ahead and establish those value relationships and color relationships, and definitely the edges and the interplay of those edges. I also absolutely put the background in when my eye is dead, but the model is still up there.
Yeah,
and I just
that's
need
good.
to do
I like
something.
that. That's a great point. Use that time that way.
But yeah, and I'm trying to like really actively think about what edges are important and where do I need that relationship between the model and the background.
Yeah.
And where don't I? Because I will leave a good amount of this unfinished.
Yes, of course. That's good.
I will leave blank canvas showing, so I want to be strategic about where that is and making sure that's helping to describe the form.
Tell the story. That's really good.
I love that you brought up how, you know, your ideas of your process, even a month ago, is different
Yes.
from how you're approaching something now. I think
Yeah.
that flexibility, and you're always learning and always trying to improve your process. It's like not so much a fixed
Yeah.
thing is so real to how we actually work.
Yes. I feel like that's the exciting part too. Like if you're painting the same way every time you know, not
Yeah.
sit down at the easel, but walk up to your easel. There we go. I could see that being a recipe for feeling pretty bored or like
Yeah.
burnt out.
Or your brain is turned off.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not engaged with what you're doing.
There's some security I sometimes long for, though, I know I'm going in this direction. I know I can solve problems this way,
yeah.
but then how do I solve these problems? I think you're right. That's a good point.
It's kind of that balance
Yeah.
between like knowing, like having a method so you know what you're
Sure.
doing, and
Sure.
and by doing that, then it allows you to kind of not think about
Yeah.
it
I
anymore.
like that.
You get that into the more intuitive,
Intuitive.
mindset.
I like that.
Right now, I'm just making some notes on for my color values, I should say. That way I kind of get the relationships working, and if I need to make any changes, then I do so on the palette before I start painting on, or covering the canvas.
Vicky, pause real quick, y'all. Vicky, I just wanted to answer your question. At this moment, the video you're seeking is on Facebook. Since you're actually on there, you should be able to go down and check it out. It is called How to Varnish Your Painting. So check it out. But at the moment, it's not actually on YouTube for some reason. We'll need to upload it onto there. So since you're actually on Facebook right now looking for it, you should be able to find it.
Be Lewis. Giving the people what the people want. What were you saying, though?
Long story short, just making sure that, for example, I had to change the value of my background because it was too light in order to get the contrast that I was looking for. And so doing this when the paint is thin and dry, that way you can build on top of it and be more intentional with your mark making, and once you kind of know where things are going.
That's good. That's good.
Have you guys had any painting related revelations lately?
Revelations.
Revelations is a fun word. What would y'all say?
I would say it's not so much a revelation because it's been told to me so many times. But
A re-revelation.
I recently was in Washington, D.C., and I went to the National Gallery and looked at some amazing work. And all comes back to unity.
Yes, yes.
Unity and that tension between unity and variety.
Yeah.
Like there's so much you can unify and not include, and it makes the painting so much stronger for it. It's all about selection. It's all about that tension between having interesting shapes and variety and depth, but then something that syncs it all together. So I find that unity is what I need more in my work sometimes. And so I look at certain landscape paintings and like, oh, you didn't break up the grass into 1,000 colors. It's almost one that you just slightly broke up. And so that's always, it's something that was told to me a lot, but I still working on learning how to do it.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I'm going to stop you guys on those thoughts because it's our model break, but we will continue this conversation after the break. We will be back in 5 minutes. Thank you, guys.
I don't remember what we were talking about before, but I was scraping off a part of this painting here where the hair was, and it makes me think of a lot of y'all, I'm sure know who Daniela Stone is, Italian painter. Y'all have painted with her many times and studied with her, I know, but there's a great Eastokes video, right? Painting you, right? Yes, Louis painting Erica. This is very like Inception over here, but one time I was watching her paint at her home where that was done, and she had a big landscape, and she took her palette knife, and she just went like this, and she was like, all over, and she goes, it is for unpredictable effects. And it was like the happiest thing ever. And so anytime I scrape a painting, I think of unpredictable
I always think of her saying that.
So good.
The unpredictable effect.
Such a fun thing to say.
Okay, time for some.
That was a fun experience to be able to paint Erica over there, and very difficult because being outside, the weather changed like 3 different times on us, and so we were going to do one painting, but we ended up doing like 3 different versions, right? Because so like anyone who watches that video on Eastokes, you'll notice that like we decided to actually make a tutorial on how to adapt to the weather. Oh, wow, that's cool. And so we did like 3 different versions of Erica, and then we just finished out whichever version we had more days of that weather type. So, but it was definitely one of those where you adapt as you go, and you're like, well, this is actually a great learning experience for artists because this is what real life is like.
Yeah, I loved eavesdropping on that one.
I bet you did. Yeah, talk about some good conversations to listen to.
I'm gonna move this.
So something that I'm thinking of, though maybe not showing right now with my piece, but the very early on in my art education, I remember the first person who really helped me understand the crown of the head and how the highlights on a head are kind of round. And so thinking about like the orb of the head, we all know, drawing a sphere, et cetera, but what does it look like to capture that in the highlights? And so I'm trying to think about that right now, but anyway, do as we talk about, not as maybe you see, but yeah. Hey. That's good, thank you. Thank you so much. But I do think that is a helpful thing that can create form on a head and bring some realism and also still allow you to simplify the hair, because of course and some people will be, but I'm not trying to paint every hair. And so what does it look like to still create that form?
And seeing how the highlights on the skull, or highlights on the hair, mimic the shape of the skull.
Yes, that's good. That's really good. Something that I'm just thinking about, because it's just good practice that I've been told too, is that when you get into your studio, sometimes you just want to go, and of course this is this is a studio time with luxury, so I recognize the fact that we can't always do that because we're just happy to get into our studio. But if you have your art books there, the idea of just like sitting down with your art books and opening them up and just letting your visual memory bank be kind of flooded by images that you love or images that you want to study a little bit. And I think it's very cool to consider what it is to like always be building that visual memory bank and letting that kind of be a place where you start your painting sessions. Again, I don't always do it, but I think it's a great practice. Amaya Garpide, who now is at Lime Academy with her husband, Jordan Sokol, but they were at Florence Academy in New York, and she would talk about that, how she would just go in her studio sometimes, and she has a son, and so she, it was really hard to even get to her studio sometimes. Life was so crazy, but she really tried to respect the process of being inspired by just visual things. And so anyway, I thought that was such a good practice.
Sybil, can you slightly rotate towards me, your face, just your face? Just a little bit more. Perfect, thank you. Does that work for you guys?
That's fine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Certainly.
You're great at adjusting.
Yes.
I
You
can
are.
see you like really isolating.
Yes, it's great. Thank you.
So if you guys were to talk to an art student who's just starting out, but let's say like they kind of know all the foundational things, what would be like one or the two like most important things that you would say about painting to them?
Good question, Caroline. Got all the good questions.
I'm thinking, I'll describe it this way. If you go into a museum, like at this stage when you feel like you kind of know some general concepts, and so you're not like a pure beginner. Is that the phase that we're talking about?
Yeah.
I think it's important to start paying attention to what interests you.
That's good.
And maybe, just as an example, going into a museum and not necessarily looking at everything, but only the things that like really grip you, and spending time with those, maybe, doing some sketches or something, and thinking about composition, like starting to think about the artwork and not just the technical aspects of it. That way you kind of have that carrot in front of you for when you continue to keep growing technically. You're still kind of mulling over those bigger ideas in your brain that only you can come up with.
That's good.
Like your kind of individual interests.
That's good.
Like keeping those, fostered as you continue your technical growth.
I love that. That's really good. I'm still thinking about my answer. I may have to come back to me on this one.
I think what Erica just said also does like a really great job of helping inform how you want to learn and where you want to learn.
Good.
Like you are going to have a very different takeaway with different teachers, and I think at the point where you know a little bit, but you still have like a significant chunk of your journey ahead of you, you can kind of think like, well, I'll go anywhere where someone's really good and get the skills that I need. But it can kind of get you into this way of thinking of like, oh, there's one right way to paint. And I would say there's probably a fairly right way to paint for the way you want to work.
That's good.
But I think it takes people a good amount of time to actually realize that. And hopefully you realize that once you're actually in the place where you want to be.
That's a good point. I think something that I was frustrated by in the beginning of, / maybe even still now, about painting is that you want to get to the point where the things that were hard in the beginning are not still hard. I think like wanting to be like, I don't want to think about drawing anymore. I just want to paint, like this whole thing. But the fact that we're always drawing, we're always doing these foundational things that we learn, we're just learning to do them better. But then there is freedom that comes from like owning those things. And so the more we appreciate them, the more we lean into them, it just opens up worlds for us. So I will say, this makes me think, I know we all come from different worldviews here, so I like completely respect that. But I'm a Christian, and I remember someone saying in a Sunday school class one time, never get over Jesus, like never get over him. And it's sort of like it applies here. It's like never get over drawing, like never get over proportion, never get over gesture. Like these things where you're like, just keep leaning into them because they're just worlds in them that can just be appreciated and plumbed. So anyway, I think that's something that comes to mind for me. I don't know if that helps, but. Also, keep having your art friends and your art conversations too. Like, have those people that you call to like ask them what they're working on and tell them what you're working on. I'm preaching this to myself too, but it's like having an accountability partner in a way, in some sort of structure. But not only is that fun, but it also is inspiring. And it's a safe space, like we've already said here tonight. But those are so important to like keep moving forward. Is there like a forum set up on East Oaks? Like, are people like, could people on? Can we connect within East Oaks on Facebook and stuff like that? Because I'm just saying those are good places to find those people, you know. So
yes, we're working on creating that kind of community.
Awesome, that's so cool.
It's in the works.
That's great. I'm not surprised at all that that would be a vision that y'all have. So cool.
I'll ask an easier question. What is your favorite thing about painting?
I'll say first, I tell people that are not artists this all the time, but I love that when you paint with oil paints, it's like you're painting with butter. There's something extremely satisfying about that. So I'll just start with that as my like first answer. Then other people can answer for real, and I'll come back to me.
For me, it's just seeing how it's just visual delight. I don't know another way of putting it, but
great.
Even when I'm just mixing my colors or looking at the palette and seeing like these kind of flickers of cool colors and how they work together, and just really enjoying how that works. And I actually think really like those simple kind of things, like you're talking about how it feels like, when it feels like butter, or like what something looks like, or just these like small fun things. Like it's so important to keep track of those.
That's a great point.
As you're working, because it's obviously so easy to get frustrated, or when you're working and lose perspective, or lose finding when you're in the studio, sometimes it's like, oh, why do I do this?
Why do I do this? Yeah, remember your why.
Or you're trying to aim for something that feels so far away, and you're like, maybe I'm not good enough, and you're like, actually, it comes back to those simple things, because at the end of the day, it is you in your workspace, and keeping in mind those more simple reasons why you. Simple but meaningful reasons why you like painting, or why you like creating.
That's a great point. Isn't that the Simon Sinek video? If y'all haven't watched What Is Your Why, do y'all know that? Or like, do y'all know that video?
I don't know
like
that,
start with why. That video, I don't necessarily agree with 100% of everything he says in it, but there's so much truth to this idea of like the compelling nature of our quote why, both for ourselves and for what if we sell something, if you're selling your paintings, whatever it is, do you have that why very clearly defined for yourself? It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, I think when we were at Portrait Society, in the talk with Chef Hine, Mary Kwan said that she just she doesn't really care what she makes. She just really enjoys the act of putting
Yeah.
paint on the canvas.
Yeah.
And I heard that and I was like, that is how I want to feel every time I'm at the easel.
That's awesome.
And funnily enough, Jeff said it's the opposite. He does not enjoy painting. He likes having a painting at the end of it.
It's very interesting. The direction of their goals there, the
Yeah.
process of or the final product. Really interesting.
It's kind of like Jeff's approach is kind of like if you hate mowing your lawn, but you love seeing your groomed lawn and the product, you know? It kind of sounds like, in a way, that's how he's perceiving how he sees the painting process, you know? It's almost like also like golfers where you're out and they actually are frustrated 95% of the time, but that one shot that's beautiful and you're like, okay, that's worth it. That, you know, that'll hook me for the rest of the time, you know, for another 10 years.
My dad is a retired surgeon. He did spine surgery, so just very casual. But I remember I asked him one time about his job, and I was saying, you know, of course there had to be things you didn't like about being a surgeon. And he was like, yes. And he said, like, I think I asked him for a ratio, and he like said, this percentage I liked and this percentage I didn't. And I was like, well, what percentage would you have had to do to like have it be like to where you would still wanted to have done it? And he was like, 51% like, 49% don't. And I thought that was so interesting that there can be a lot you don't like about something or something that's hard or whatever. But if there are these things that are still things you love about it, that it can make it worth it. So anyway, I think that's interesting.
I'm all about reminding people that it's not this just magical thing that just somehow comes out of your hands and you're just like magically gifted somehow.
Yes.
As if it doesn't take work or hard or failure.
Blood, sweat, tears, right? Crying, tears.
Yeah.
No,
that, you know, if you're struggling like that's okay.
Yeah.
It's usually a sign that you're learning and that you should keep going.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I think I saw somewhere on social media, it was like a graph of when you're learning,
Yes.
and then you're like getting comfortable,
Yes.
and then you plateau, and then you feel the struggle. Like it's like where you feel the struggle and where you feel ease, and they
Yes.
have this like visual.
Was that Mark D'Alessio?
It might have been Mark D'Alessio.
Yes, I've seen that. He has that on his, at least he did have that on his website a
Yeah.
long time ago.
Found that to be useful.
Yeah.
So you could be like, okay, this is where I am in my journey.
Yes. That's good. Okay, also I'm going to say something not really technical, but not more theory for a second here. It's interesting. I'm like thinking about the value of doing the value as in the worth of doing a color study. So this is obviously sort of a color study. It's a sketch in itself already, but I would have chosen a different imprimatur, a different color to tone this canvas. Now that I've done this, I'm realizing that this orange is I'm having a hard time with it. And I am realizing that that's why if you do your studies like that, you solve those problems ahead of time, and then you don't fight them on your actual canvas. But I also remember that they say that Sargent would have a lot of blank, already stretched, like empty canvases, and he wouldn't be afraid to just like throw something aside and start another one. And I'm not saying that I need to necessarily do that here, but I thought that was so interesting to hear, that idea of like the freedom to know that if something's not working, like you can just start again, you know. But I think that the more studies you do, the more of those things you figure out ahead of time. And then you let them guide. That idea of like an impression from the beginning, like what's your goal, your intention, like we talk about. But if you do, let's say, a 1 or 2 day or even a 3 day little color study, you literally, if you get a feeling from that, if you get something you like from that, let that drive your whole process. Like let that be like your guiding light. Not that you can't switch it up or try new things, but like hold that physically in your hand as you're painting the big thing, and to make sure that you go back to that, that you're still keeping true to that. What are y'all thinking about
too
right now?
fussy. I was trying to get the eye sitting in the socket and making sure I'm turning my, thinking of the head like a sphere, making sure that the planes I want to be facing away are indeed facing away. And then the eye started looking super weird, so I just
love that.
take a brush, just make it softer.
Yes.
And not sticking out so much, so that way visually it doesn't bother me as I work on it.
That's good. I like that.
Bringing it back to what you were saying earlier about, can I solve this in a simpler way, like a more unified way? Usually that's the signal.
Yeah.
Is I'm trying to do too much.
That's good.
You're amazing. Yeah, and if at any point you all have any correction, like
You're sweet. Thank you. We'll
not just me dictating.
You're
Like
a really good angle for
Yeah,
it. She's
yeah.
so square to me. It's very hard for me to see.
If anything, I would actually maybe have you go a tad towards Erica.
Yes.
But
My head.
Just your
yeah,
head.
your head.
Just your head.
Yeah.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Are you on mute?
Yep. I don't know how that keeps happening.
We value your voice, so we're glad you're back.
Thank you.
All right, I don't know if Caroline saw this or not, but hold on just a second. But Lisa said, whether good or not, it is like experiencing a miracle when something appears on a blank canvas. So, and then Salih says, I'm going to bed now in the UK. Time is 12:30 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad that we were a part of your evening. And then Tina said, hello, just joining a little late from Chicago. What a lovely model and such a gorgeous shirt color.
Yes, it is beautiful. It is beautiful.
I love how much of it's coming back into her hair.
Did I hear that?
Although I really want to unify the kind of like pink blue thing that's happening with her skin tone with her hair in the background. I don't want it to be basically like 4 different color statements. Yeah, so I need to figure out how to bring some of that kind of like Terra Rosa ultramarine color out of her face and potentially bring some more green back into her face, but extremely carefully.
Yes. We're here for it.
Love it.
It is fun to like verbalize those goals, though. You know.
Yeah.
It's also helpful.
Oh, I totally forgot. I knew exactly what I wanted to start with.
Where? What?
I think I have a drawing problem that I need to check.
Being brave.
Well, I don't know why I did that.
If your body is concentrating so hard. Lysandra, what are some of the people, artists from the past or present, that you like to look?
I love that question. It's a fun question. This is in no particular order, though I feel like if I don't start with Sargent, then I would be sad. So I'll start with Sargent because he was my first painting love. I will say I think it's been interesting on my journey, such as it is, that I have also come to see that there's so much to be gleaned from him, and yet there's also things that you could have different goals. If I could paint like Sargent, I'd be fine. But the more I study,
Just
whatever,
all right.
it's fine. It's okay, I guess. But that I think my horizons have been broadened. Even like the Russian painters, I think Repin, and then Serov was Russian, right? Yes? Is this right? Can we get a yes? We'll say yes. Anyway, for the sake of this, if he's not, then please someone say in the chat, because I'm going to be sad now that I don't know that. But I love Soroya. I love Zorn. All these late 19th century painters, early 20th century painters are such inspirations for me. I will say, if I could go back again in terms of a degree, for just like a college degree, I think I would have really benefited from having an art history degree, because there's just, I think it's a lifelong thing, but I see the gaps in that in myself that would be so nice to have that foundation. But thankfully we can learn that our whole lives, so that's good. And then I do, my teachers from Florence continue to be big inspirations to me. I love Jordan Sokol's work, Amaya's, Daniela Stone, Stephen Bauman. There are many, but it's pretty cool to study living masters too. Jamie Korth, I love his work. I would joke in art school that anytime he would post a new painting, it was like my birthday. I was so excited. And I will just say, if you follow people on Instagram who are living painters and they post a painting and you really like it, you should screenshot it, because sometimes they choose to take them down and you'll go back to Instagram to look for them. They won't be there anymore. So I have albums of my favorite painters on my phone.
So we have Forrest from Korea, who actually wrote us in Korean, and I put it into Google Translate so I could actually read what it said. But it basically says, hello from Korea. Thank you for the great video. We're glad you're joining us, Forrest.
Can be a good thing.
Yes, it's so true. I like your name too, Forrest. It's a great name.
We also have Bipin from Nepal, who says, good morning from Nepal. So I love that it's good morning some places. Some people are going to bed in like England because it's 12:30, and over here it's, getting to be evening. So super cool. Glad you're joining us.
Very, very cool. Something that I'm going to start to think about in a second. We'll see how it goes in doing it. But my teachers, I remember Jordan Sokol would say this. He'd say, at some point, you kind of get your proportions where you think they're working. And of course, don't analyze mine too closely, because you would say they're not ready yet for this. But you eventually just go, you know what? I'm going to fall in love with a little bit of an area. And you don't want to fall in love with an area too soon, because you don't want it to be in totally the wrong place. But at some point, you kind of just have to go, I'm going to commit to this area, and I'm going to see how this goes. And I'm going to lock in an eye, and then I'm going to lock in another eye, and kind of start to really build from those places. So pretty soon I'm going to try to start doing that. We'll see how it goes, but I think that's my goal.
I think I'm on the same page.
We're on the same path. I'm glad.
It's time to commit, to make some decisions.
Yes.
And because this is something I would tell students a lot, and I've probably said in previous videos, but sometimes you need to have something down in order to know what to do with it.
Oh, yes, so true.
So as long as you are attentive, perhaps, to how much paint you're putting down.
Yes, yes.
Now, confident, enough paint where you're making the decision is clear. It's okay if it's wrong, because then you know what to do. Like then have those problems loud and clear, because then you know, okay, I can work on this thing now.
That's really good. I do think that's such a freeing concept of put it down so you can correct it. I'm like, oh, I love that.
And then different paintings might have different priorities, and so like it's that balance of not having kind of a lazy mindset of saying like, oh, I'll deal with this later. I'll put it down and I'll correct it later. Like, no, you want to try. Like,
yeah.
But at the same time, not be so, not to the point where it's preventing you from putting a brushstroke down.
Where you're paralyzed.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
Don't want to do that.
That's good, Erica.
Having that paralysis.
She's dropping some truth bombs, people.
Okay. That was the sound of me being like, all right, I'm going to work a little bit of the flesh tone into her hair.
Okay, so you're doing it.
I'm gonna
see
we're gonna figure this out.
Okay, we're excited about it.
Thank you.
We'll be here for the other side.
It turns out blue is related to green. I think I can work with this.
Look at you.
Right?
Can I just say I had...
Well, this is actually a fitting question. Figurative artist Benjamin Lester says, do you have problems with the reflective quality of light in blonde hair? Now, of course, we're not talking about the flesh that you were talking about, but since we're on the hair topic, I thought I would go ahead and pop up that question.
Read it one more time, please. Can you
read it one more time?
The question, yeah.
It was, do you have problems with the reflective quality of light blonde hair?
I think it's helpful to not oversee it. Like, it's in making it like too much contrast. And so always remembering how something sits in context. So that's where squinting can come in handy, where you're not looking into all of the like different, like you said, like reflections and values and interesting things that when something's light, it can bring about. But remembering their place in relationship to the whole.
That's good. I'm thinking about your very good question. I don't know if I have a lot to contribute at this moment. It's a really good question, though. I find blonde hair hard to mix. Also depends on the type of blonde that it is. I just feel like there are a lot of factors to blonde hair that can be tricky. Louis, do you have any comments on that? On the reflective quality of blonde hair? No.
Yes, I do. It takes me a second to get to my mic. So I think that the biggest thing is a lot of people tend to make the value too light and the difference between the two ranges of value too far and too distant from each other. And so compression of the value range is very important, and to make sure that you start, even though it's like light blonde hair, key the light blonde hair to a degree that is low enough to where you can create that range and allow for it to not be like all the way to the tippy top of your range. But the good thing is that also keys the skin tone to be lower. And because the skin tone's lower, then you have a better range of chroma to work with in the skin tones. So, yes, the reflective quality as far as highlight is what I would think he's talking about. So that's what I'm, referring to. And then of course I always think about that hair is like a ribbon. The highlight goes in perpendicular to the grain of the hair. So, so once you think about that, So once you start thinking about that, it starts to make a little bit more sense of how to find a highlight and how sort of the volume of the hair flows.
That's really great. I think all of those things are really helpful. Something I just gleaned from that, the idea of, it's very true that if you don't key it too high, you have more room to get to your highlights, but also then that allows more chroma in the skin tones, as you said, et cetera. That's really good. And then I like what you said about like a ribbon. I've never heard that before, that it runs like a ribbon, so the highlight runs perpendicular, yes? Across it. That's really good. Thanks, Louie. Got a painter in the house.
We're all in this together.
Mm-hmm. We are.
Okay.
We believe in you, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You got this, Chelsea. All eyes on you.
Yeah, no pressure.
All right, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Good news. I live for this.
Have y'all seen the movie, The New Little Women, that came out in 2019?
Mm-hmm.
That movie is so beautiful. I love the color, I'm going to call them color stories. I don't know if that's what they would call them, but that's what I'm going to call them. The color stories of the characters, how each of the daughters, I don't really know why this came up, but just thinking about the colors on Sable's face and just all these things about color. But the way they use color to tell that story, they pop back and forth chronologically from present day to the past. And the past is all warm colors. It's like the whole thing is warm. And then the present is often cool because of the way the storyline changes. And just the way they use color to tell that story. And each person has a wardrobe that has a different palette, and they're consistent. And then the mom, so she has these 4 daughters, right? 4, yes. The mom, kind of, you see those colors represented in all of her wardrobe, and I think that's intentional. Anyway, I just love the way they used color in that movie. And if you haven't seen it, even if you're not a woman, go see it because it's so beautifully done and lots of fun art conversations to be had. I feel like every shot in that movie is a painting. Someone had a lot of fun with the compositions and the light and all of that in that movie. I have a lot of respect for what they did.
Beautiful cinematography.
It is beautiful. It's beautiful. I could talk about it longer, but I'll stop. Ooh, not the red color. You're doing great, Sable. You saw that smile, it was good.
I was like, yes. Just a little, like,
Just a little
thing.
Just a little. So nice.
I was like, ooh, maybe I should include those shapes.
I know, it's true. But that is something that's...
No, just...
But something that's so nice about painting from life, that of course we all know this, but like those happy accidents that happen that then go, oh, I want that, like I want to do that in my painting. That, and if you are painting from a photograph, then those decisions were made in one moment. I also heard Dawn Whitelaw say one time that when she will use photographs for reference, but that she keeps them like on a rotation, like every minute or so. The picture changes. And I thought that was a really cool way to sort of get a sense of like painting from life in a way, because it keeps it fresh and it's like a slightly different angle of the subject. Which I thought was very cool. So maybe if you do a lot of photography, painting, consider that too. But I do love, that is something neat about talking to your subject. Of course, it's just cool to talk to your subject, but they stay alive that way. when I was in college, I painted my roommate, and she watched TV the whole time. And it looks like she watched the TV the whole time. She had a pretty deadpan expression on. She's lovely, and I love her, but I didn't really capture her vitality very well. And you don't really notice this until the end if you're really focused. And it was over several sessions, but anyway, so engaging your subject has lots of fruit.
Bipin, I hope I'm saying your name right, but I wanted to bring your question to the forefront. How important is it to match the colors and value in the palette itself, or do you adjust on the canvas?
What do y'all say?
I try to mix my color values as accurately as I can, but knowing that there's room for improvement
Yeah.
and adjustment, and as well as I think of having it as like the values are most important, and I have a little leeway when it comes to color. We all see it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But I also want that color vibration, so I don't want only just one color for everything. If I pre-mix it, like it's a great way of having a plan without being too stuck to the plan. Like I can change what's on my palette,
That's good.
but I try to do it on the palette, and in that way, if I'm making adjustments, I do it directly onto the painting in one stroke, and so I'm not necessarily like fussing with it.
Fussing, that's good.
Because I find if I'm confused or I'm working something out, it's just going to show that on the canvas. And so.
All right, everybody, we're back.
Time to work on the area I've been avoiding.
Oh, yes, yes.
What is that for
painting
you?
session.
We all have that spot.
This, central eye that
Yes.
if I don't
Floating
have it
eye.
in there, you're going to know.
Yes. It's hard to get away from the eye in the front of a 3/4 view. We believe in you.
I appreciate the support.
Glad. Y'all, I did the thing that our teachers say never to do. When you take a break, the artist is not supposed to take a break, some of them say, though honestly I think it's good to take one, but I should have been mixing my paint, because if you're like into these tiny little piles you have left, isn't it Sargent who said that if you paint with small piles, you'll paint differently? You need big piles of paint so that you paint in a
That sounds-
bolder way.
I don't know
feel
who said
that's
it,
a
but that
thing.
sounds familiar.
Yes, I feel like it's a Sargent thing, but anyway. Having no paint is definitely not big
Well, I
piles of
like
paint.
it regardless.
Well, you like it. It's a good truth regardless. Good truism.
I say that and then I don't paint them.
I know. No. Go to that eye. We're going
Like-
to hold you accountable.
Like, ooh, the hair.
No. You were saying earlier one of our friends from school would cover the face and have to make him force himself to work on another part of the painting.
So you get so drawn into the
Yes,
portrait.
yes, yes. Okay. I like how you're holding your paintbrush right now, Chelsea. It's very good to hold it different ways like that.
I do what I can.
But it allows you to paint differently, I think.
All right, we have a question. Could you explain value compression on a more plastic example? I understand it in theory, but have problems in applying the idea in practice. I think he meant maybe practical example? Yes.
Impression, yes?
So maybe this isn't necessarily like a definition, but
With you.
if we're looking, I'll use this eye that I'm going to paint as an example. Like if I zoom in and I look just into the eye, I'm going to see all these contrasts, like, deep into the eye socket, and then I look at her eyebrows, and I look at the creases, and then the little highlights that are caught on the eyelid and also below. But if I really look in there, I'm going to see a huge range of values that when I look at the eye in relationship to the entire head, then you notice, oh, the hair is brighter, the nose is brighter, the eye socket is actually sitting deeper into the skull than those things. And so you're finding that your value range within a certain space is smaller. So you still will have variety, but it's just at a much more subtle range. And so you're not using all the black and all the white. You're finding maybe you can still have shadow, midtone, light, and highlight, but they're much closer together on a value scale.
That's good. And where did you say, in this painting, did you? I was listening, but did you say you were unpacking that of where you would compress those on this one particularly?
I was just looking at the eyes.
Yes.
And so, for example, the distant eye, if I go pitch black, it's going to come forward in a way that I don't want it to. And then if I make the light that's on the top of her eyelid too bright, again, it's going to bring it forward when I'm going to bring those values closer together. And another thing you can think of is grouping with your shadows. If I compress them all into, you can start with one value, then it'll read as a shadow, and then that way it lets the light and all the variety that you see in the light, lets that speak as light, and then the shadow can go away because you have fewer pieces of information to look at.
That's really good.
So it's thinking of it in those two ways is what I do.
That's great. Also, something that is maybe dancing around that question a little bit, so it may not be exactly answering your question, but even now I'm looking at the eyes here, and I'm looking at, when I first started, I kind of put a general sense of the shape of this band of the eyes across the nose bridge, and I chose a value for them that now I'm realizing feels really dark for the key that I have. Is my key perfect? I don't know, but it's the key that I have right now. And so I'm actually going to go in and lighten this halftone up a little bit because it's distracting me that it feels like the sockets are going into her skull, and I want to bring them forward a little bit, bring them into the light a little bit, because it's much more subtle than what I have it right now. And I think that's a good, what is it, that a dark inside a light will always look darker than if it was in the dark itself. And so does that make sense? Did that read? So that idea of I have a dark eye socket sitting within a light face. It will never read as dark as you think it is if you stare into it. But if you look at it in the context of that light space of the face, you probably need to lighten it up a little bit to fit in context, because that light around it almost bleeds into it in a way too and makes it feel lighter than it otherwise would be. And so that's, I think, a way to keep, again, that idea of the whole, that you see those darks in context of what's around them. So you even see that in a landscape painting. If you're going to have let's say you have a tree and you have what are they called, sky holes, inside a tree, isn't that what you call them? But if you wouldn't paint a sky hole popping through a tree branch as light as the sky around it, because it's surrounded by the dark of the tree. So you would actually probably paint that a little bit darker, and actually darker value blue sky popping through. It'll actually read more real that way. So anyway, some thoughts that might contribute to that. Very good question.
There's also, what's really nice is that there's a logic to it. If you understand your light source and its direction, and you understand your major planes, and how they're facing or turning away from the light source, that'll give you a really great context to start putting the smaller pieces in. That way, if I have a plane that's turning away from the light, then I'm not going to have, like you said, those bright lights inside of it, since it's all turning away from the light.
Yes, that's really good.
So I'm thinking, eye sockets here, making sure that they're turned downward, but they're not, completely horizontal to the light source, and so they're not going to be, cut off and
that's good.
Pitch black.
Yeah, that's really good. Again, more tooth bombs.
All right, we got
got another question coming up. Also, Sally says, "Hi guys, it's great to be able to join you. Live in this time slot from Australia. So awesome to have you, Sally." Also, Sally says, "Just wondering if your process is different when you're painting a more finished piece as opposed to an Alla Prima timed session. Many thanks."
So Lysandra and I were talking about how we are not Alla Prima painters.
Yes.
And so treating this more as like a color study versus a finished piece.
Yeah.
And so, for example, for this, I use a little bit of walnut oil to help spread the paint in certain areas. And if this were a piece that I were painting on a longer term, I wouldn't use walnut oil at this stage. I would use minimum amount of medium at all. Try to keep things as dry as I can. And so there, and also I know my limits. I know that I will try to be as specific as I can, but I know that I'm not going to get the finished specificity that I crave in this first pass. And so I think it's important to at the beginning understand like where you're going, what you're doing, and that way it helps you manage your process and adapt it to what you have at hand.
That's so good. Also, in a slightly, what'd you say?
Oh, I was saying too bright.
Oh, too bright. In a slightly different, in some ways, nuance of that, when at the Florence Academy in New York, when Jordan and Amaya and the other teachers would do demos, Jordan would say, "I'm going to just do this exactly the way I would start a big painting." And that was really interesting for me because he really didn't try to like go for it or put the eyelashes in or whatever. He just let it be like 2 hours of a painting, and he knew that he wasn't going to, this wasn't going to be a finished painting or whatever. And I thought that was so helpful to see because, one, it was helpful educationally to see this is his process, this is how he starts a painting, and this is what it looks like, whether he has 2 hours or 70, but also I think giving himself permission to not have a finished painting at the end and not feel like it has to look a certain way because it's a demo or because it's a 2-hour painting or whatever. If your goal is to work on your process, then it's okay that it won't be, quote, finished. So I thought that was really cool. I liked that.
To jump off of what you're saying, like having priorities for whatever you're doing right now. So for this one, I want to get a sense. I want it to look like the model. I want to get a sense of the light effect and some of the colors, but I know that like I'm not going to be able to get into the eyes in such a detailed way, and for this project. So I'm not even like I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking to do that, and I already know that from the beginning of my process.
Not your goal.
However, I can explore some fun like color variations and seeing how things work together, exploring how this like beautiful green shirt works with like her skin tone and her hair color, and how do I group all of this together. Like, those are questions I'm going to ask myself. And
that's good.
But I know that I'm not going to get the finished product that or like finesse that and also variety that I can achieve when I have more layers onto something. And that's the way that I work and that I really enjoy. I find that my work benefits when I have time to consider it. And so that's a little bit of insight into what I value.
That's good. Good, Erica.
And Chelsea, you are primarily Alla Prima, aren't you? So I imagine you have a different experience.
Yes.
What is your thought
At first
on
I thought you were
Which
going
is
to say,
great.
so I imagine this is totally different from how you normally work. And I was like,
No. What's bubbling up for you as you think about that question?
I will typically go a little slower at the beginning, and quite frankly, I'll be a little bit more cowardly in terms of checking and double checking my drawing and like using every tool available to me to make sure that like I can really trust that drawing.
If it's going to be a longer drawing or something.
And I think honestly, like that's helpful. You know, it helps me make sure I make what I'm trying to make. But I think it hurts me. So this is great because this is, you know, throwing caution to the wind. There's probably a better idiom that I could have used there, but and I really do have to like trust that I'm seeing it. I didn't measure a single thing that I put down. So that's always an interesting litmus test.
Yeah, isn't that fun? But there's something encouraging a little bit about being like, you know, these aren't perfect proportions, etc. But like, I can trust my eye, like knowing that there is some validity to our eyes. You're probably like, what's she talking about? Look at her painting. But I think it is helpful to know that you don't have to have a ruler out or a plumb line all the time. Something that our teachers would say at school was that, you know, as you're getting more confident in your drawing abilities, do it first and then check it too and see if you were right, and then you get less reliant on your tools, though your tools are always your friend, and I think they always will be. But I thought that was interesting, and it really forces you to work on your eyes, not just rely on your tools. I think that our eyes were created with an amazing capacity, our brains were created with amazing capacity, and part of what we're doing as artists is like learning about that. We're going, oh wow, I didn't know that we could do that.
I'm just thinking of value compression right now. I'm putting some marks for the mouth, and if I'm zooming into it, it looks like the downward facing plane of the upper lip is really dark, but in terms of the relationship of how the light flows over her face, and it's not a completely, turning away from the light. It's not actually as dark as it looks when you're staring at it. And so that's one of those examples of you can maybe compress it towards the light in the situation. I mean, it's still shadow, but like relatively speaking, you're not. It's not so like that. It's not a cave. It's not a hole in your face.
So not a hole in the face.
Just thinking of value relationships, and sometimes it's helpful to point out a moment of where I'm thinking about that.
That's great. Ooh. They said that, isn't it Sargent who said like work from the middle tones? But then there are different schools of thought on that. But I just keyed something really dark and it really freaked me out. So can't live in that space. Are people painting along? If so, how's it going?
Yes, it would be great to hear which of you are out there painting along with us. Make sure you submit some of these pieces to, or at least tag East Oaks in like your Instagram page so that we can see what you're doing. We always love to see what people are making all over the world. So.
I want to know, this is cool, y'all. So, well, I don't know, I think it's cool. I found a postcard from, I can't say this, I should be able to say this because this is such a formative moment for me, but the museum in Austria that is like the art museum in Austria, when my school, we took trips to Europe with our orchestra. My sister was in the orchestra, and so I went along. I wasn't old enough yet, but I remember being in front of, speaking of influences, of one of the Velázquez paintings of, it wasn't Las Meninas, but it was one of the ones of the princess that he did over and over and over again. And I remember as like a 5th grader just being totally captivated by this painting. And it's cool now, like it was a long time for me until I really named and like claimed my true like art love. But I do like look back at that time and go like, that was a moment in time where like there was some inspiration that occurred. And I wonder if y'all like know, if was there a painting that you saw in your past, or was there like a moment where you're like, that's when I think some of the germ of this happened for me. Curious. But I found that, all that to say, I found that postcard. My family recently moved, and I still have the postcard, and I found it, and I want to frame it and put it in my studio. But anyway, anything for y'all?
That's cool that you have such a formative moment. Yeah.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
Shoot. Erica, I was hoping you
I'm
would
sorry.
have that.
No. I thought that you were speaking,
no.
and I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh,
I was
no. Yeah, I would have to think about that,
Yeah.
I think.
For me personally, I think I connected more with just the act of doing it,
Yep.
like as a child.
Cool.
And just, and fortunately I was encouraged and went to a school that encouraged it and everything. And so I just really liked learning how to work with my hands and you know, the visual coordination of everything and just, and then I discovered like, oh, you have all of these like artists and like, and what people are doing. And so I think it was more like that direction.
The doing of it, that's very cool.
I feel very relieved by that answer. Because I definitely didn't have something I could think of, at least.
I don't think you had to. It's just, it's neat.
I think for me, it was like Disney animation artists. You know, I saw like a couple of behind the scenes of like, I don't know, like Beauty and the Beast or something. And I was like, whoa. So it wasn't a classical painting, even though it most certainly was later. But I think, go Disney.
Amazing artists. I mean, they are incredible artists. Draftsmen, etc. What were you saying, Chelsea, earlier?
Oh, I was just saying that I am getting into this very precarious spot where there's like a little bit of green in that like muzzle area that Erica named.
Yes.
And it's like, I want to put it in, and it's like, damn, I gotta be careful.
I know, I don't want to make her look sick. It's a fine line.
Or, I mean, I find that it's usually like a facial hair vibe.
Oh,
if
also that. Yeah, I hear that.
5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah.
Your face.
That is more of it, isn't it? Ooh.
All right, everyone, we are back.
And we're back.
Erica, what do you think?
Can you, yeah, perfect.
I was
And then
thinking about what? What are we talking about? The newbie over here. Funny. Something I'm curious if y'all do this too. I don't always do this, but I enjoy making little piles of pretty high key color wheel colors that I keep on the corner of my palette. So then I can take my strings, and my strings are pretty loose right now, but my strings of value, and go, oh, I see a little bit of pink in that. I can just pull from that string, in that little pile. Or I see a little bit of yellow in that, and it allows me to be more colorful in a more efficient way, I feel. Curious if y'all do that.
Yeah, I do something relatively similar right now. Well, my palette's a mess right now, so you can't tell. But it's one of those ways of where I have my structure of my palette, but it's as a way of getting some variety and color vibration where I'm not so stuck where I can't change anything.
Right.
I do not have piles, so I feel like
So you don't do that? Yes, no.
But this is a fun disaster on
is a
palette,
fun.
so.
I feel like, I know I talked about my dad earlier, something he would say about medical school is that people will choose their, and this of course makes sense, but they'll choose their specialty in a way that is consistent with their personality. So like you'll see, you know, I don't know, maybe the introvert will be a radiologist and he'll like be back reading films, and then the risk-taking I don't know, the person who wants to fix something will be a surgeon or whatever. You know, it's just interesting how that happens. But I feel that I kind of had a sense that some things that you learn in school really, really jive with your personality, and other things just don't. And I think it's good to stretch yourself in those things that don't naturally come to you. But I remember when basically the idea of like people mixing, you know, 4 strings of value and all these things, and I was like, oh, I'm going to suffocate. But then going, well, what is helpful about this? What can stretch me? About the organization of that, about the efficiency of that, and then also where can I be free, and the concept of having an open string versus closed string. So closed strings, you mix literally every pile, right? And you're like you're not adjusting from them.
Tell me about
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
So like a string of value from like light to dark is like one string, and then maybe do like a cool string and a warm string and then a black and white string, etc.
That sounds beautiful. I would love to mix that way.
Right, it is beautiful, but it also can feel a little constricting sometimes. And so I think that then having an open string is like, well, I have strings, but then I mix into them, and I feel free to tweak them. It's not all of my colors are not coming from just those strings. So anyway, that was helpful to like realize I'm also a personality, and I don't have to only paint one way. So anyway.
So we were talking about compressing value.
Yes, we were.
And the more I squint, the more I cannot see the color of her shirt. And I thought that was a big distracting mistake, and I'm pretty sure I was correct.
So wait, tell me more about what you're saying.
Granted, squinting is not to see color.
Right.
But when I squint down and I like look where I'm supposed to look,
Sure.
I really don't see the green that I see when my eyes open. And I kept thinking like, man, I feel like I'm making a big mistake by having that green just anchoring the bottom of the composition. I don't think this is working. And yeah, when I squint, I realize like the thing that's important is that value, and that's it. And I should probably just make an executive decision there.
There you go. You are the executive on that painting.
That's kind of a cool effect. Just wiping in that texture.
That's cool.
Well, Jolene said right before the break that she was painting along, so
Good,
that's
Jolene.
exciting to hear.
That's awesome.
And then Antonati, we have a question from him. It says, how to paint black objects like black drapery, cloths, etc. How do you divide the light and dark and avoid getting chalky in the lights? And then Marty Welsh says, hi.
Oh,
from
hi.
Nashville.
Hi, Marty.
The first thing that comes to mind for me that I'm curious if y'all are track with this or if you disagree, that both black and white have colors sort of inherent to them related to their environment. So thinking of it in terms of like, what color black is this? Is this a black that like I'm seeing a lot of purples in, or is this a black that I see a lot of blues in? Or it's just interesting to me how colorful these things we think are so neutral are, because they're always influenced by their environments. So that would be the first thing I would say, is to try to name the primary colors that you see within those blacks. And then maybe even when you're mixing your blacks, maybe don't just take from your pile of ivory black, which I'm not opposed to, I do it a lot, but could you also mix a really dark purple, or mix a really dark blue, or a really dark brown, and name that brown? What type of brown is that too? Is that a rhomb or more brown, or red brown, or whatever, and or green brown, and then mix from there, and that I think can help it from not being chalky.
I think it's also helpful to remember, again, with like this theme of value compression, things can look chalky when the lights and the darks are too far away. Ooh. And so if you're, and also this concept of you can lighten something, but it doesn't have to just be lightened with white.
Yeah.
You can lighten with one of your pigments.
That's really good. So what is a pigment that you might use to lighten with?
As an example, you can lighten with yellow, where you're, and of course it'll change the color and you have to make adjustments, not only just using yellow, but that's just one example. Like for example, if you have a reflected light in the shadow that you want to put a little, accent in, you can use You can, lighten something with yellow. You can lighten something with red. Like
Yes.
lighten dark,
Yes.
like black, for example. You use red and you mix them together. It's going to lighten the value.
Yes. That's good.
Things like that.
Very good. Also, and this is a rule that can be, quote, broken too, but I think if you are mixing light to dark, some sort of value string of some sort, some value, trying to keep your lower values, your darker values, from having a lot of white in them, and like Erica just said, trying to lighten them if you need to with chroma, with colors instead of with white, I think will keep them from being as chalky just in general. Sorry, going back to my song.
Gary also says that he is painting along as well.
Where are you, Gary?
I believe Gary is in Sarasota.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you know Gary?
I do.
That's so cool. Sable, you're doing so well. It's a pleasure to be painting you. Also, something I want to say is recently in my studio, I haven't been spending as much time there as I would like, but I've been doing more painting from photographs than from life, and I think this is such a good reminder to me of like the inspiring nature of doing things in art that get you out of your comfort zone and that you really love, because you can get in these ruts where things just don't feel like they're going well, or you feel discouraged. And mixing it up, even to put aside a project that you're working on that you feel like you're stuck on, and just go paint something you love that's not a commission, or just kind of getting back to the, I know we talk about this, but like get back to that joy of painting kind of thing. Like Erica was even saying earlier about like what is it that you love about painting, and remember and do those things. But I think that's a great way to go back to your things that are hard with new inspiration.
Amos says, is that Chelsea Lang? I love her channel. And yes, it is. It is the Chelsea Lang, ladies and gentlemen.
Got some followers, girl.
I do. Some awesome followers.
That's great.
I think I just painted the hair not in the way Lewis was talking about.
Oh.
The opposite. Yeah.
Do as we say, not as we always do. This is a real live demo. Cannot predict.
Oh yeah, there's that whole other side that keeps escaping behind my easel. Okay.
Can she straighten her head just a little bit? Is that okay? Can you? There we go. A little bit. Is that okay? Do y'all mind?
That's perfect.
Thank you. Perfect's pretty good. Good job, Sable.
So this is something I should have done earlier, is cover this hair, because then I would have known my values were off. So to all the people out there, don't avoid.
Also, I think there's it's a helpful exercise towards the end of a project like this that is, limited in time and scope and all of that. And you go, oh, I would have done this and I would have done that. But to start asking yourself, but what was valuable about this? What did I glean from this? What did I learn that I would do differently next time? Because there's so much value in all of those conversations. And if we just go, the proportions are off, or I don't like my composition, or whatever, it kind of defeats the lessons to be learned. So framing those conversations, I'm preaching that to myself too as I'm changing the shoulder. In art school, they would say, that looks like the subject's sister. Good job. So right now, I think I'm like its second cousin, but that's okay. Getting closer. Family member. My sister just had a baby, 34 weeks and 1 day, 4 pounds, 6 ounces. Very big surprise baby to come so early. But it's been so fun to look at her and go, okay, now which one do you look like more? Do you look like your daddy or like your mama? And discover, I think an artist always looks at the world with likeness somewhere in mind. But
anatomy lens.
Yes, the anatomy lens, exactly. What bridge of the nose did she get? They literally went to the beach thinking they had their last, casual vacation. And an hour after, she didn't even eat her brownie at dessert, and they had to go to the hospital. And then they spent 2 weeks at the beach and didn't see the ocean for 2 weeks. Stay at the hospital. Oh, wow. No, it was wild. But thankfully, healthy baby.
So Wendy Rose says, I'm painting along somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean. Great painting, ladies.
Wow, thanks.
I want to know more about
I know,
this.
right. You can't just say that, Wendy.
You can't. You just can't just say somewhere in the North Atlantic. We have to get a bit of the story on
Why
this.
are you in the North Atlantic? What are you doing there? And good for you for painting in the North Atlantic. That makes me think Tanvi Parthari. Is that how you say her last name? Parthari?
Patari.
Patari. She's an artist who has taught at Florence Academy for a long time. She went to Antarctica, right, to paint. And she had to make all these specifications to be able to paint in such a cold environment. And she painted a lot of these glacial forms and all this stuff. Quite the adventure. She was on a working, it was sort of a cruise ship, sort of not, I think, but.
Was it science, where they're doing research related?
Yeah, something like that, yes. And she's just out there with her little easel painting in sub-Arctic weather. But anyway, if you look her up, Tanvi's website, and I'm sure also her Instagram, it's been a couple years, but I always thought that was so cool that she did that.
So Wendy says, I live on a boat, and she's called The Art of Happiness.
Wow. That is awesome. Bon voyage, Wendy. Do y'all paint with mall sticks?
I should do it more.
I should do it more. I need one right now. Need one right now.
I end up doing this
yes,
cross
that thing. Yep, exactly. I do it too. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Values, values, values.
Yeah.
You know, I got to commend Wendy because yeah, I don't know how about, she must have some serious sea legs, but can you imagine painting on a boat right now, rocking with the waves? My painting wouldn't last very long.
There's an
Imagine all the
artist-
marks, though.
Yeah, the mark making, exactly.
Talk about the unpredictable effect.
Uh-huh.
Lots of happy accidents.
That's right. There's an artist named Virginia Evans who was a West Virginia painter in like the 30s. And my grandmother, my grandparents are from West Virginia, and she was a collector of her work. And we have a painting that Virginia, in like the 30s, was on a working ship. It was not like a cruise ship. She traveled on the ship and she painted from the bow of the ship some really cool, at least one really cool painting that we have. But I've always thought that was the neatest thing and like so brave of her to do, go by herself like that and do that. But anyway, really neat. Again, she's one of those, I credit like the visual encouragement of like seeing her paintings in my grandmother's home to be like an inspiration for me later on. Not that I paint like her, but just seeing that real art all around her home. Such a privilege to see. How are we doing, ladies?
This is the power painting time.
Power painting.
I feel like Erica just went on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah. Airplane mode. That's funny.
So Father's Day is this weekend, right?
It is.
Anybody do anything special for Father's Day
Good question.
without spoiling the surprise?
I am not going to be with my dad, so I have to plan ahead. Gotta think about that. Anybody else, anything?
We'll probably do a fun dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot.
I'm sure y'all can't hear this on the video, but it's late here, but there's some birds that are going to town outside. It's so nice.
Actually, you can barely hear them.
Can you really? That's
Yeah.
great. I'm glad.
Hush.
Hush now. So there was one conversation that I had. I feel like there are these moments where you're like, I'm so grateful that this experience happened. But I was in school and I stepped out from my studio and one of the teachers, Maureen Hyde, she had her own private studio in the place where the second year students were, and she was like mixing colors, and she was like known to be in a way, I don't know if you'd call her a colorist, but she was really good with color. And so I like started interviewing her on all these things about color and complements and analogous colors and all these things. And I like look back on that conversation and go, like, that framed so much of my like initial understanding of like how to utilize color and complements and all these things. And if I had like not stepped out and if she hadn't been so gracious with her time, I'm sure eventually I would have maybe gathered these things. It was so helpful. So I just think it was a good lesson to me, like take advantage of an opportunity, but then also it was such a gift from her to do that. I love in life the analogy of if you put a green next to a red, it makes the red look more red and the green look more green, of course. But then I love that even in relationships with people, that when you're with the right kind of people for you, you will be more like yourself and they will be more like themselves because they're next to you. I just think it's really cool. So anyway.
That's awesome.
Isn't that a neat thing? Oh, man. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick short break and then another short session, and then we will be calling it Dunzo for tonight. So we'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back for the final session.
Okay, can you straighten up a little bit?
With your
Maybe
head.
less inclined. And turn slightly towards me. Beautiful.
Thank you. You okay there? So these last few minutes, what's going to really bother you if you don't fix it is the question I'm asking.
Yeah.
It's like, what can't you live without fixing?
It was helpful for me just now to step back and just to make sure
Yes.
certain shapes weren't looking too boxy.
That's good.
And I noticed that my shadow here is super orange and coming forward when I actually want it to tuck underneath.
Oh, I see.
So those are some big things that I can do in a few minutes that might make a difference.
Something also I just think is just a cool concept is shifting planes with chroma rather than necessarily value. If you have a very high key area, like if on her skin tone she has this lovely complexion, but and this is something I think Sargent did very, very well, that teachers pointed out, is this idea of, maybe you shift from a warm to a cool on a child's face or on a light skin tone or something, and that really helps to turn the form without making things look too heavy or dark. So anyway, something that I'm thinking about a little bit.
Goes into that whole compression idea.
Yes, it does, doesn't
The
it?
theme of tonight.
Yeah. Because you kind of run out of room if you're compressing, but you can still, within that value, shift a plane. She has some really pretty form of the musculature around her lips, particularly on the bottom, that are sort of making that lovely pout to her lips that is catching a highlight that's so pretty.
I didn't realize that was musculature. My brain immediately went to if I Exercise my face. Well, I get that too, because it's really pretty.
It is beautiful. I mean, actually, like, yes, probably is the answer to those questions for all of us.
I definitely just thought it was like fat distribution.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's all for all of us. It's a little
Okay,
bit
well
of
that
both.
makes me feel a little better. Maybe I'm not supposed to be like working harder on my face
You're
muscles.
hilarious. There was a girl, a woman in New York who introduced me to the concept of face yoga. And she like had all these there are a lot of YouTube videos if you want to know, all these like ways to work out your face to prevent or minimize wrinkles and all these things. It was very cool. She looked about 30 and she was in her late 50s, so I believe her that it worked.
Shit.
Louis over there Googling face yoga now. He got jokes.
Okay.
We're with you.
Stop messing around now.
Yeah, there ain't no time to mess around. I'm still messing around, but there ain't no time.
Neeks says something. Is it okay to oil prime paper? Or would it be too flimsy of a support? I tend to paint on paper a lot as it saves space, but find gesso too absorbent for my liking.
I know the artists I know who work on paper with oil shellac it versus oil priming it.
There you go.
I don't know if that actually speaks to the question or not, for what it's worth. But that's the extent of my knowledge.
That's doing good knowledge.
I do think experimenting with materials and I don't necessarily know that answer, but one thing you can try it and then see the absorbency, to see if any of the oil soaks through into the paper.
That's good.
And to damage the paper, that would be one thing to be attentive to.
That's a good point.
Just to let you know, there's 3 minutes left.
Sable is happy, we are sad, so at least somebody's happy. We're happy for you, Sable.
Okay.
Okay.
There was a comment, Nicholas Uribe paints with oil directly on raw paper. Amazing results.
That's awesome. Thanks, Nicholas.
Well, good for him.
No, I don't mean that. I think it's great. It's really cool.
No, it's just being funny.
Oh, man.
One minute.
Oh my goodness. This is where we pull out our finished painting, and voila!
Yep. This is where everyone panics and it's just like,
Panic mode.
And then say, oh, I shouldn't have changed
Yeah, I know exactly. Keep telling me that for the next 55 seconds. Don't try to change everything.
all right. And basically that means you have that amount of time to answer this last question here. Neeks also says, okay, thank you. Also, how do you get your portraits to look so soft? I paint in oils too, but find that the edges of my portraits always look harsh. Is it just a matter of using soft brushes?
I mean, I sound like a broken record, but values. Having your values closer together in certain areas can help give the illusion of softness, because there's not something that's drawing your attention away.
That's good.
That's not the only way of thinking about it, but that is something where you're not having to blur something in order to make something soft. Like if you're struggling to make something soft, it might be a value thing.
It's a great point. Good place to land.
Yep, that's a good place to end the whole thing. Everyone, thank you so much for your time this evening. Also note that East Oak Studio has a platform that if you want to know more information about it, go to eastoakstudio.com. We have another thing called Atelier Live. Please ask us questions by emailing us at info@East Oak Studio, and any ideas or things that y'all want to see us to do in the future, we'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and we look forward to you next month. I also will be doing an open critique next week on our platform for all of our subscribers. So if any of you are subscribed, please submit some work, and I'd be happy to critique it for you. And we will be doing this again in the middle of next month. And thank you everyone for joining. Have a good night.